paradrama tales.
My sister was in labor. Her husband was deployed. She asked me to stay with her, to hold her hand, to not let her go. Through it alone, I did. And now, my girlfriend thinks it was incestuous. You'd be amazed how quickly something pure can be turned into something ugly, if the wrong person is looking at it. It was a Tuesday, late morning. I was at work. Nothing dramatic, just answering emails, half listening to a meeting I didn't need to be in. And then my phone buzzed. It was my sister. Now, we don't talk every single day, but when she calls out of the blue, not a text, not a meme, but a full-on phone call, I pick up, always. Her voice was shaky. "Hey, I think my water just broke." That's it. No drama, no screaming, just those quiet, clipped words, half panic, half trying not to panic. And suddenly, everything else in my day felt like background noise. I told my manager I had to leave, didn't even finish the sentence. Grabbed my keys, got in the car, and drove to her place. She was already packed. She's the organized one, always has been. Her husband, Matt, is deployed overseas. She'd been planning to FaceTime him during the delivery. Brave as hell, but I could tell she didn't want to do it alone. In the car, she gripped the seatbelt with one hand and held her belly with the other. We didn't say much. She just kept exhaling slowly. I drove with both hands tight on the wheel, like that alone would help. When we got to the hospital, they rushed her in. I texted my girlfriend to let her know what was going on. She said she'd meet us there. Honestly, I wasn't thinking about anything other than my sister. She's my older sister. She's been there for me through every breakup, every stupid phase, every failure I didn't want to admit. And now, it was my turn to show up for her. At first, I stayed in the hallway, let the nurses do their thing. Then, when things slowed down and she was in the delivery room, she called me in, said, "Can you stay? I don't want to do this alone." And yeah, it was emotional. She was scared and in pain and trying to hold herself together. And I was there, holding her hand, telling her she was doing great, wiping her forehead with a towel. I didn't think twice about any of it. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't weird. It wasn't too intimate. It was family. My girlfriend showed up about an hour later. I waved her in, but she stayed mostly outside, said the hospital lighting gave her a headache. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just assumed she was giving us space, or maybe just waiting for the baby to arrive. I didn't know then that something was already shifting, because for me, that day was about one thing, being there when it counted. No rule book, no thinking about how it looked from the outside. Just a brother doing what a brother should. And I wouldn't change a single second of it. But apparently, someone else saw it very differently. The room was quiet, not silent, just focused. You know how in movies, birth scenes are always chaos? Screaming, doctors yelling, people fainting? It wasn't like that. It was tense, sure, and emotional. But it was also calm. Dim lights, soft beeping machines, a nurse checking monitors with practiced ease. My sister, sitting up in the hospital bed, breathing in that way they coach you to, deep, steady, controlled, even though everything inside her was probably anything but. She looked at me and said, "I can't believe I'm doing this without Matt." Her voice cracked a little, and I just stepped closer. I didn't say anything wise or brave. I just squeezed her hand and said, "You're not doing this alone." She nodded, eyes wet, but strong. And that's the thing about moments like that. They're not dramatic. They're not wild. They're just real, raw, human. She gripped my hand tighter with every contraction. Her breathing changed. She cursed once and apologized for it like I'd never heard her say worse. At one point, she looked right at me and said, "If you ever tell anyone I cried, I'll kill you." I laughed. She laughed. And then she cried again. And I stayed. I didn't look at anything I shouldn't. I wasn't in the business end of anything. I wasn't gawking or being weird. I was at her side, wiping sweat from her forehead, holding the paper cup of ice chips when she needed it, and telling her when the next push was coming, based on the nurse's hand signals. It was beautiful, exhausting, emotional, sacred. And when that baby finally came out, pink and perfect and screaming her little lungs out, my sister just collapsed into herself, half crying, half laughing, asking over and over again, "Is she okay? Is she okay?" She was, more than okay, and so was my sister. I stepped back to give the nurses room, just watched as they wrapped the baby in warm cloth and handed her to my sister. And when she looked down at her daughter, something in her changed. Right there in front of me, something softened, opened, settled, and I was there for that. I wasn't thinking about how it looked. I wasn't calculating optics. I wasn't worried about being appropriate. I was just there, present, supportive, and completely overwhelmed with love and admiration for the strongest woman I've ever known. That was the moment that mattered. That was the only thing real. Later, when I walked out into the waiting room and saw my girlfriend scrolling through her phone with a look I didn't quite recognize, I still wasn't thinking about anything being wrong. I figured she'd want to come in, meet the baby, hug my sister. But instead she said, flatly, "You were in there the whole time?" I nodded, smiling. She didn't smile back, and I didn't know it yet, not fully, but the story I had just lived through, the one that felt so honest and pure, was already being rewritten in someone else's mind. When I walked out of that delivery room, I was still holding a piece of something pure. I'd just seen life come into the world. My niece, tiny, wrinkled, red-faced, screaming with all the strength in her 6-pound body, was real now. And my sister, exhausted and glowing in that way only new mothers can be, had looked at me like I was her anchor in the middle of a storm. That meant something to me. So, when I spotted my girlfriend in the waiting area, I expected, I don't know, maybe a smile, a hug, something soft. Instead, she looked up from her phone like I'd been gone too long at a party we weren't enjoying. "You were in there the whole time?" she asked. I nodded, still smiling, riding that emotional high. "Yeah." She asked me to stay. I couldn't leave her alone. No response, just a blink. Her eyes dropped back down to her phone. I sat beside her, started to tell her what it was like, how strong my sister was, how loud the baby cried, how the doctor cracked a joke right before the final push. But every sentence I tried to share met silence, or worse, that tight, polite nod people give when they're already judging you. And then came the question I didn't see coming. "Don't you think that's a little weird?" I blinked. "What?" "You, in there, with your sister, while she was giving birth. I don't know. It just feels off. Intimate. Too intimate." I laughed at first. I thought she was joking. I even said, "Are you serious?" She didn't laugh back. Instead, she looked at me like I was the one who'd crossed a line. Like my presence in that room, in that moment, was something shameful, something inappropriate. That's when the room started to shift. Not physically, but emotionally. Like someone dimmed the lights inside my chest. I felt myself retreat a little, confusion hardening into disbelief. I tried to explain. "That's my sister. Her husband is deployed. She asked me to stay because she was scared." What was I supposed to do? Say no? She shrugged. "I'm just saying, it made me uncomfortable. You don't see how that could be too close?" Too close. Those words stuck, because they didn't come from a place of curiosity. They came from accusation. And suddenly, all the beautiful human moments I just lived, the hand-holding, the whispered encouragement, the towel on her forehead, the look in her eyes when the baby cried, were being reframed, not as compassion, but as something else, something darker. That's the part that stung. Not just that she didn't understand, but that she didn't even try. There was no curiosity in her questions, no openness, just a quiet verdict, already handed down. You did something wrong, and I don't like it. And as I sat there next to her, fresh from witnessing birth, from feeling deeply connected to my sister, to my family, I realized I wasn't going to be allowed to feel proud, not around her, because to her, what I did wasn't love. It was weird, too intimate, incestuous, she'd call it later. And that's when I first knew we weren't looking at the same world. I don't blame her for not understanding, not at first. She's an only child, grew up with her mom, just the two of them. No siblings, no cousins she was close to. Her world was neat, contained, quiet. Intimacy meant romance, or nothing at all. Affection was deliberate, rarely loud. She didn't grow up sharing a room, or a bathroom, or a childhood full of bruised knees and secret-keeping. So, maybe when she saw me hold my sister's hand, when she heard that I stayed in the room while she screamed, while she bled, while she gave birth, all she could see was something too raw, too exposed, too unfamiliar. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't see, was the history behind that moment. She didn't see the 10-year-olds huddled in a blanket fort watching scary movies. Didn't see my sister dragging me home from a party in high school because she knew I'd had too much. Didn't see her covering for me when I failed a class, or making me soup when I had the flu and mom wasn't around. She didn't hear the late-night talks about life, fear, and how we both swore we'd be there for each other no matter what. She didn't grow up with someone whose presence was so natural, so foundational, that loving them wasn't a choice. It was a fact. And when I tried to explain that, not with speeches, just with calm, she folded her arms and said, "That still doesn't mean it's normal." Normal. As if love between siblings needed to meet some external definition to be valid. As if there was something shameful in the way I showed up. Something that had to be filtered, dulled, made more acceptable. But here's what I've come to realize. When someone hasn't lived that kind of closeness, when they've never had to show up in the middle of someone else's crisis, not because it's convenient, but because it's expected, they will often mistake it for something it's not. Because to them, love like that only exists in romantic terms. They can't categorize a bond that has nothing to do with sex, but everything to do with loyalty. And it's not their fault, not entirely. But it becomes their responsibility when they choose judgment over curiosity. She could have asked. She could have said, "Help me understand." She could have trusted me enough to believe that there was nothing hidden behind my actions. Instead, she labeled it, and the second she did that, the second she called something sacred weird, she made it clear that her comfort came before my character. And that was harder to forgive than the misunderstanding itself. Because if love can't tell the difference between what's unfamiliar and what's wrong, it's not love that's mature. It's love with conditions. And I'm starting to realize I've been standing in the space between the two. We've been going in circles for 2 days, maybe more. Time starts to blur when every conversation ends the same way. I ask, she deflects. I explain, she shuts down. I try again, slower this time, clearer, with more empathy. She shrugs, rolls her eyes, asks me why I'm so defensive. I'm not being defensive, I'm being exhausted. Because when someone questions your intentions, not just your actions, but the heart behind them, you can't just fix that with a good explanation, especially when they're not listening to understand. I've asked her directly, "What about it made you uncomfortable?" She says, "It's just weird." I try again. "Can you help me understand why?" Because I want to understand, but I need more than just weird. She shrugs. "I don't know, I just wouldn't have done that." That's the loop. That's the wall I keep running into. She doesn't want to unpack it, doesn't want to admit if it's jealousy, insecurity, inexperience, or some deeper fear she can't name. All she knows is how it felt to her, and in her mind, that's the final word. And every time I try to clarify that what I did came from love, from loyalty, from showing up the way a brother should, I feel like I'm defending something that shouldn't need defending. This wasn't betrayal. It wasn't infidelity. It wasn't crossing a boundary. It was family. But somehow, I'm the one being interrogated. Not directly, not cruelly, but in that passive, persistent way that wears you down. I start second-guessing. Not what I did, I stand by that, but whether this relationship is built for moments like these. Whether she'll always filter my choices through her discomfort rather than my character. She says she's not mad, but she is. It's in her tone, in the way she holds back when I go to touch her shoulder, in the way she looks at me like I've revealed something about myself she doesn't quite like anymore. And I keep thinking, if we can't talk about this, which should be straightforward, rooted in something as universally understood as family love, how are we supposed to talk about the harder stuff down the line? Marriage, parenting, real loss? If we can't get through a birth without a moral debate, what happens when life throws something even messier at us? Talking in circles is a form of silence. It's the noise we make when we're not ready to tell the truth. And right now, I don't think she's ready to admit what's really going on. That maybe she feels threatened not by what I did, but by the depth of something she doesn't have, and maybe never will. A bond that existed long before she came along. And I wish she'd just say that. Because we could work with that. We could sit in that discomfort together. We could talk, really talk. But instead, we circle. Around and around, and I'm getting dizzy from loving someone who keeps walking away every time I try to meet her in the middle. It hit me one night, mid-argument, if you can even call it that. By then, we weren't even raising voices anymore, just tiptoeing around each other with quiet tension, like roommates who once kissed but forgot why. She'd just repeated it for the third time that week. I'm not saying you did something wrong, I'm just saying it made me uncomfortable. And I finally said it out loud. Okay, but what you're implying is that it was wrong. You're assigning a weight to it that it doesn't deserve. She blinked, didn't respond right away. Because that was the truth she didn't want to face. See, there's a trick we sometimes play in relationships. We cloak our discomfort in morality. We take what bothers us, what triggers us, what we personally wouldn't do, and we wrap it in ethical packaging so we don't have to admit it's just about us. That's what she did. She didn't grow up with siblings. She didn't grow up watching someone hold someone else's hair when they threw up, or comfort them in the middle of a breakup, or sit outside their locked bathroom door during a panic attack just so they knew someone was close. She saw that kind of closeness once, raw, physical, vulnerable, and because she had no framework for it, she called it weird. And the part that stunned me wasn't her discomfort. It was that she wanted me to feel guilty for not sharing it. That's when I realized something important. Love doesn't give someone the right to rewrite your values. It doesn't entitle them to reshape your character to fit their comfort. And if they try, if they consistently ask you to apologize for being a good son, a present brother, a decent human, then what they want isn't love. What they want is control that wears intimacy like perfume. I told her that night gently, "You're allowed to feel uncomfortable, but I'm allowed to say that I'm proud of what I did, that I'd do it again. Because I would. I'd hold my sister's hand again. I'd stay through every contraction. I'd witness that baby being born with tears in my eyes and awe in my chest, and I wouldn't change a damn thing. I won't rewrite that memory to make someone else feel more secure. And if that makes me the bad guy in her story, then maybe I'm in the wrong story altogether. Because here's what I know now. If love requires you to shrink, to doubt yourself, to twist something beautiful into something shameful, it isn't love. It's management. It's image control. It's a mirror that only reflects them. I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to build something honest, where we could see each other fully and not flinch. But when I showed her who I was, a brother who shows up, who stays, who chooses compassion without checking how it looks, she didn't lean in. She recoiled. And that told me everything I needed to know. There's a strange kind of weight that settles on your chest when you feel like you're being asked to choose between two people you care about. And not because one of them's given you an ultimatum, not out loud anyway, but because the air changes, the expectations shift, and suddenly you realize if you move in one direction, you're automatically pulling away from the other. That's what it started to feel like, this quiet, suffocating triangle I never signed up for. My sister never made it complicated. She didn't even know there was a complication. To her, I was just her little brother who showed up when she needed someone most. She didn't see it as a statement or a gesture. It was just love, expressed the way we'd always expressed it, simply, without politics. But my girlfriend, she carried it like it was personal, like it was some kind of betrayal, not because I cheated, not because I crossed a line, but because I chose to be emotionally present for someone else. And the more I tried to bridge that gap between the woman who grew up beside me and the woman who was supposed to walk beside me now, the more I realized one of them understood the language I spoke, and the other was trying to translate it into something darker. It's not that I didn't try. I tried to validate her feelings without invalidating my own experience. I tried to listen, to explain, to offer context, not excuses. I tried to pull her closer while standing firm in what I knew was right. But with every attempt, I felt the ground split a little wider beneath my feet. Because the truth is, my sister never asked me to choose. But my girlfriend did. Quietly, passively, wrapped in suggestion and silence and the unspoken rule that I should have known better than to be that close. And I guess that's when I realized this wasn't about choosing between two women. It was about choosing between two versions of myself. One where I show up for the people I love without apology, and one where I perform a diluted version of that love to keep someone else from feeling insecure. And when it's framed that way, the decision becomes clearer. Because I don't want to live a life where my instincts are questioned, where empathy is mistaken for impropriety, where I have to run every act of kindness through a filter of someone else's fragility. I want to be proud of the way I show up. I want to be in relationships where love isn't treated like a limited resource, where giving it to one person doesn't mean I've taken it from another. So, no, I'm not choosing between my sister and my girlfriend. I'm choosing between being whole and being tolerated. And I've spent enough of my life trying to explain the kind of love that should speak for itself. It crept in slowly, like most doubts do. At first, I stood firm. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I showed up for my sister. That was it. No apology necessary. No explanation owed. But over the next few days, something shifted. Not because of anything dramatic. No fights. No accusations screamed across the kitchen table. Just subtle things. The way she'd go quiet when I mentioned the baby. The way she pulled her hand away a second faster when I reached for it. The look in her eyes that said, "You still don't get it, do you?" And suddenly, I found myself shrinking. Replaying that day in my mind, not to relive the beauty of it, but to search for cracks I might have missed. Did I stand too close? Did I speak too gently? Was it too much, too long, too intimate? I started second-guessing a moment I once felt proud of. A moment that had nothing to do with romance or impropriety, and everything to do with being present, with being family. But now, I was wondering if I'd crossed some invisible line, not a real one she had drawn in her head and handed to me without words. That's what shame does, doesn't it? It sneaks up behind you, even when you're doing the right thing. It whispers, maybe they're right. Maybe you went too far. Maybe your love is too much. And if you're not careful, you start to believe it. You start to believe that showing up is something you have to defend, that tenderness is suspicious, that loyalty has to come with disclaimers. But here's the truth I had to walk my way back to. Slowly, painfully, but fully. I didn't do anything wrong, and I won't feel ashamed for being the man I was raised to be. I won't feel ashamed for holding my sister's hand when she needed someone. I won't feel ashamed for choosing presence over performance. I won't feel ashamed for loving in a way that's honest, full, and deeply human. Because the moment we let someone else's discomfort redefine our integrity, that's when we lose the thread of who we are. And I've worked too hard to be a good man. Not a perfect one, not a saint, but a man who shows up, who listens, who doesn't walk away just because something gets messy. So, no, I won't carry that shame. Not for her, not for anyone. And if loving the people in my life the way they deserve to be loved makes someone else uncomfortable, then maybe they're not standing close enough to understand. Maybe they're just watching from behind their own walls. And maybe, just maybe, they're not ready for the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission. I didn't storm out. There was no final argument, no dramatic goodbye, just a long look across the room, one filled with everything I wish she'd understood and everything I knew she wouldn't. Then I packed a small bag and I left. Not out of anger, but because I knew staying meant shrinking. It meant explaining kindness over and over. It meant defending love where no defense should be needed. It meant watching someone question my goodness, not because I failed, but because they didn't recognize what they'd never known. And I couldn't do that anymore, because here's the truth. Being good shouldn't make you feel guilty. Being close to your family shouldn't feel like a crime. And choosing to show up, fully, openly, without hesitation, should never be something you have to apologize for. I was proud to be there when my sister gave birth. I was proud to hold her hand, to witness that moment, to stand in for the man she loved who couldn't be there. And no one, not even someone I cared about, gets to take that away from me. So, if you're listening to this and you've ever been made to feel wrong for doing the right thing, if someone's ever turned your compassion into a question mark, if you've ever walked away from a conversation wondering whether love itself might have crossed a line, let me tell you something you might need to hear. You don't need to dim your heart just because someone else never learned how to read its light. There's nothing inappropriate about showing up for the people who raised you, protected you, laughed with you, and bled beside you. Love is not possession. Love is presence. And anyone who makes you choose between being a good partner and being a good sibling isn't either. So if this story echoed something in your life, stay with us. Share your thoughts. Subscribe. Join the conversation. Because the world needs more people who love out loud, and less shame for those who do. And if nobody's said it yet, you did the right thing.